Thanks for joining me here today, guys. Got a kind of a quick video for you. I know a lot of you saw the army roster reveal for the Lizardmen, so I wanted to kind of go over my notes from the video from the live stream and just kind of talk about some of the stuff that I noticed might possibly be transferring into Total War Warhammer 2 as far as actual units and some of the cool mechanics that they brought up in the that Creative Assembly brought up in the live stream. So we'll kind of kick it off here with the legendary lords. They were talking about Mazdamundi and kroq-gar, two of the lords that were kind of speculated leading up to a lot of the revealed trailers and whatnot, and were confirmed in some revealed trailers and even more confirmed in the live streams as they were. But they were saying that Mazdamundi is going to have some new casting mechanics to exemplify how amazing that he actually is at casting. So I'm really curious to see how Mazdamundi is really going to be portrayed when it comes to spellcraft in general. In fact, the whole Lizardmen army has really a different kind of dynamic, and we'll go over that at the end of the video. I want to kind of go through each one little thing so we don't just kind of spoil it all. But Mazdamundi is going to be able to he's got a couple of different mount options. He's got his little palantir, his platform, but he also can ride on Zlaak, or Z-L-A-A-Q, his ancient stegodon, which is pretty damn awesome. So he's going to have a monstrous cavalry option as far as something to get him around. And it's probably going to have some additional functionality because the stegodons themselves have skinks on them that do poison damage. So I could see that being portrayed then into the actual Zlaak here. But the other legendary lord we were talking about is kroq-gar. He's got quite a few actual mount options this time around. So not this time around, but in Total War Warhammer 2, he can be on foot, then a cold one, then a horned one, which is basically a very rare bred cold one, and then Grimlock, his Carnosaur. Now, he's described as, of course, the fighty lord. He's going to be, the live stream described him as armor piercing and high hitting. In fact, they were saying all Saurus are pretty tough and high hitting in general. And he'll have good control of his Carnosaur, as he's going to be kind of the Beastmaster option for the legendary lords. And he's going to, which kind of leads us to believe that there's a rampage mechanic, and that's what I was originally thinking at the beginning of the stream. And as we progress through this video, you'll see there indeed is a rampage mechanic. All the Carnosaurs, even the Saurus themselves, have some form of rampage mechanic built into them. And then the other generic lord that we have would be a Slan Priest, as well as a Saurus Old Blood, who can be mounted on a Carnosaur Old or a Cold one. And then for the hero options, we have a Saurus Scar Veteran, which is just going to be like your Empire Captain, a Skink Chief, which is going to be just like your generic kind of casting lord. The Skink Chiefs are pretty cool here. They're going to be on a Skink Chief and a Skink Priest. I'm sorry, the Priest is going to be just like a generic casting lord. I'm sorry, generic casting hero. The Skink Chief, you can think of that kind of almost like a goblin boss, not the lord choice obviously, but the little hero choice. So he's not going to be as stalwart, but he's probably going to be either more range focused or just another way for you to get another stegodon onto the field, because the skinks, both of them can ride a Terradon, a stegodon, or an ancient stegodon. And the Saurus Scar Veteran, just like his old blood counterpart, can ride a Carnosaur or a cold one. So it's going to be really interesting because in the live stream they were talking about how the skinks have complete control of their monsters. So they're not subject to the rampage mechanic that the monsters have on their own, or if a Saurus were to control them, minus of course say kroq-gar. And speaking of Saurus, we'll kind of segue here into the other Saurus that they mentioned. There are 5 total Saurus warriors. So there's Saurus Warrior with shields, Saurus Spear Warrior with shield, and then a Saurus Temple Guard. And we were speculating, how the Temple Guard are going to be handled, and they confirmed a lot of stuff in that live feed. And the Saurus in general will be heavy infantry. They'll have kind of these primal instincts, and it'll make them a little bit harder to control. And, you poke him a little too much and he'll go into a rampaging. And the way that that's going to be represented in the game, since I brought up rampaging so many times at this point now, is that the lower the unit's health, the more likelihood they have of rampaging. If they rampage, basically kind of think of it as like a reverse frenzy mechanic. They'll just go and destroy whatever they can in front of them. You can't control them. They're going to go hog wild. So you're going to see this really cool army that's going to have a very tanky, very strong and slow front line, because they described the Saurus as not moving as fast as the they're going to be moving faster than the Chaos Warriors, but not maybe as fast as some of the other races, which are a little bit quicker on their feet. So you're going to have this unit that is going to be slow, it's going to be heavy, going to be tanky, but also it's going to have the rampage mechanics. So a bit of a wild card in there, right? And you've got your skinks, which are going to be extremely quick and more skirmisher based, with these wild beasts that are also going to be subject to rampage as well. The Saurus in general are going to have a ton of health and decent medium armor, but also very heavy hitting. They're going to have a lot of missile defense, but they're going to have so many hit points that it won't really matter. And in fact, they're going to be, the live stream described it as like the Saurus, themselves are very low to the ground, tails and everything being lizardmen and whatnot. So Cavalry are going to have a hard time charging on them. So that leads me to believe that there's going to be an anti-charge bonus. So it's really a main line that's good against everything. Very similar to the Wood Elf main line with the Eternal Guard, which is really strong against a lot of other matchups. The biggest downside, though, is, to use the British term that they used, they will bugger off due to primal instincts. And there's a lot of them in a unit, which is going to be nice, because I think Wood Elf, I think for my units, the way they're configured, I think it's something like 70 or 80 or something like that. So we're probably going to see a larger unit than even that. But you get also the Temple Guard, like I was saying, which are the elite choices. Actually, I think they're core choices in the 8th edition rulebook, but they don't have an inclination to rampage. They're used to staying on guard outside of a temple, bound to the will of the Slann, So they are going to be having halberds and shields and light armor as well, or the same medium armor that we were talking about. And they're being the size of a Saurus means that they can actually hold a halberd in one hand. That's why we haven't seen any halberd units up to this point with a halberd and a shield. So we're probably going to see in the Saurus Temple Guard an AP, an anti-large, with again that anti-charge bonus. So I'm really stoked to see how the Saurus play out. We've seen them in a lot of the trailers and whatnot. They're the larger blue hulking lizardmen. But then we've got the other guys, other little boys in the band, the Skinks, which you guys now have seen from the memes and everything. They were kind of the forefront of the Lizardmen trailer that we just saw. You had that one skink on the Terradon with his cool little headdress. That is a skink, a little more lithe, a little more intelligent and sentient of the species. In fact, the Lizardmen are broken down into 3 kind of tiers, I guess you could say. Skink being the most sentient and smartest, but the weakest. Saurus kind of being less sentient and less intelligent, but a lot stronger. And then kroq-gar being way stronger, way more aggressive, but not as intelligent. And you guys a lot of you have mentioned it in the Reddit post that I did here with all the notes, that the kroq-gar are actually even mentioned to having the chains on their wrists so that they don't forget that they have got weapons. So it's pretty interesting to see those guys it's great to see that those guys are finally going to be making an appearance in the game. So a lot of your hopes and dreams were not dashed this very morning. But the Skinks have a bunch of different configurations as well. They have the Skink cohorts, in which case they've got access to spears, they have access to javelins, blowpipes, and they also have the chameleon skinks, where they can also the way that they described it in the livecast is the Skink cohort is going to be more of like a hybrid melee unit. So it's going to, if you choose the spears ones with the shields, it'll also have the javelins in the back kind of firing. So almost kind of like a Roman cohort in the sense that it's got melee capabilities, but it also can be ranged. But the blowpipes will be entirely ranged, or the chameleons will be entirely ranged. Or I'm sorry, not entirely ranged, but they'll also have ranged and a melee attack, but poisoned all the way around. In fact, they were saying that all the skinks will have poison in their range capabilities, with the chameleons being poisoned with their melee as well. But the blowpipes you can see are more of a harassment unit, and the skinks in general are aquatic units that are better in water, so that leads me to believe we'll see more swamp, or at least more lakes or rivers on some of the maps that are coming out. And they mentioned that the chameleon skinks are the stealthiest unit in the game, next to a tree man in the forest, which is only slightly more stealthy, they were saying. I don't know if it was a joke, but still, it's pretty funny. But every other monster that in the Lizardmen army is going to be manned by a skink, and if it's manned by a skink, the monsters won't let it go on rampage, which is pretty great because they're more like in tune with the beasts in their mind, and they've kind of mastered how to be beast masters. But moving on from the skinks, we've got the kroq-gar. They did not say much about them. They said they won't suffer from stupidity or any kind of stupid attribute that might be attributed from maybe the Blood Bowl series or anything like that. But expect them to have rampage, maybe a little bit more so than the Saurus. And also they're going to be large units with AP, maybe kind of in the line of like a crypt horror. Then moving beyond the kroq-gar, we have the cold ones, which come in 3 different flavors. A lot of the monsters, well, dinosaurs for that matter, come in 3 different flavors or so. The cold ones can be feral, which is not a choice on the tabletop, but they said that the cold ones themselves are going to be armor piercing, to be roughly as fast as an orc boar as well. But the feral ones will go on rampage very quickly. They said that they wanted there to be a way for the Lizardman player to get access to dinosaurs, quote unquote, fast. So the cold one ferals, the feral cold ones are going to be accessible pretty early in the game. What it leads me to believe is it's going to be a building, like a 3-tier building unit, kind of like you see in a lot of other factions, where the first one maybe will have cold ones as feral cold ones as an option. The second one might have the cold one Cavalry, which we'll get into in a second, and the third option might be like the Stegodon or the Stylodons or something like that. Maybe even there's 4 or 5 tiers to get like the special versions of the Bastillodons and the Stegodons. But getting ahead of myself here, the cold one Cavalry after the feral cold ones are basically now cold ones with Saurus Lizardmen on top, and they've got 2 variations here. They can be the warriors with their just normal clubs. That's the normal cold one Cavalry, or with spears. And the spear makes it anti-large, but they said that the standard ones might be at a slightly less cost, kind of like we see with the option to choose between having cav with or without lances, or with or without shields, like when you say like the wild riders with or without shields. So that might be the kind of cost difference. Like, okay, you can get the spear, but it's going to be a little bit more. But all of them are armor piercing, and they're cheaper than normal cav, and they're the most offensive unit in the actual Lizardmen army itself, which is a pretty cool thing to note. And then moving on from the cavalry itself, we have the horned ones. Now it's important to note that the only one who can ride a horned one is kroq-gar. But the horned one, like I was saying, is a very special cold one. It's swifter, wilder, more angry. And it hits a bit harder and charges harder as well. A lot of the cold ones in general will get a charging bonus, but not as much as the Stegodon will, as we'll get to. But they're charging harder, they run harder, but of course, as there's going to be a trade-off, they're going to be harder to control. A lot of rampage. So that's the 3 flavors of the cold one, and we'll bounce on over here to the Terradons. A lot of people were upset here. We didn't hear anything about the Ripperdactyls, unfortunately. I don't think they're out yet. I don't think they're out 100%. They said that this isn't hey, this is the what everything is going to be in the army. They've said this roster is comprised of everything that we are going to have in the launch of the game. So they could do the DLCs like they've been doing for like the Blood Knights, were a post-launch unit, so they could see them adding the Salamanders or the Ripperdactyls post-launch. But for the Terradons, we have the Fire Leech Bolas, the little range things that we saw in the trailer, or just the normal javelins. And if you looked hard in the trailer, you could see them as well. But they're going to be explosive and anti-infantry with no AP for the Bolas themselves, flying and very fast, but with not so great of a range. That's, kind of the trade-off. But here's a really cool thing that they mentioned here. They're going to have a drop rock kind of mechanic, just like the gyrocopters can drop bombs. They've got these rocks, these boulders that they can slam onto the units as they fly over them. So that's going to be a really, really cool, fun mechanic, because it's not going to just have frontline harassment capabilities. It can actually fly across maybe to a cavalry piece and drop some bombs in the middle of it. So you have a lot of applications for either the Fire Leech Bola or the Javelin. And then the Fire Leech Bola are these little kind of creatures that sit inside the little hammock, I guess you could say, of a bola, and as they get agitated, they explode. So it's pretty damn cool. Then we're moving on here to the Bastillodon, which also comes in 3 flavors again. I've got the Feral Bastillodon, which is going to be slow. It's going to be very tanky, high melee defense and armor. They didn't say that in specific, but that's what I'm implying, or I guess inferring would be a better word for it. they're going to be quite cheap as well. The feral, it looks like all the feral units are going to be a cheaper entry into the base version of that monster. Feral Cold One, Feral Bastiladon, Feral Stegodon, Feral Carnosaur. But they're well armored, and I mean, especially against arrows, it leads me to believe they're going to have some sort of special defense explicitly for arrows. They're basically a damage sponge, and they're very calm. They don't rampage very easily. So that kind of brings us into the revivification. That's a horrible name. Revivification crystal, which is not in the tabletop, and Games Workshop gave them the approval to do this, they were saying, and the artists really liked it. But the way it really works is it's essentially a roving spawn pool. Lizardmen are spawned out of pools, and that's going to be the kind of mechanic that the revivification brings, is it's going to resurrect and spawn units as they drop. And a little flash goes off and more spawn. So it's going to be like the the Mortis engine, and how that gives a healing and benefit to the Vampire Count's army. We're going to see something like that with the Revivification Crystal that's going to be mounted on the back of these Bastiladons. So the Bastiladon itself is going to be tanky with that Revivification Crystal. So it's going to be really interesting, because then you're going to want to target that, and it's just going to be a beast to bring down. So I'm very interested to see what the proc is on, like what the timer is on that actual spawn, or how much actual benefit it gets. Because the Lizardmen as a whole get a really cool ability called Cold Blood. We'll get to that at the end here, but yeah, I think it's going to pair with that really well. Since like I was saying, Rampage is health centric, that's going to keep them healed so they don't rampage as much. That's pretty important. The Solar Engine, this is just going to be just like the Empire's, Pimp Chariot. It's going to be a big laser, collects sunlight and projects it forward and kills the unit. It's going to have a blind mechanic though, so if you hit onto a siege piece, it'll have bad accuracy after that. It'll burn. It's pretty much going to be used to burn down high value targets, and it's not very accurate in and of itself, just like the Empire's Pimp Chariot. But it's mounted on the back of a Bastiladon, so can't go wrong there. Then we're jumping over to the Feral Stegodon, and this is going to be slightly less natured than its Bastiladon counterpart. But it's of course, it's a dinosaur, quote unquote, with horns all over its head. So it's going to have a lot of charge damage, and it's much angrier than a Bastiladon. So it brings the damage while Bastiladon absorbs the damage. So you've got two different options outside of the Feral Stegodon. You've got the giant crossbow and the ancient giant blowpipe. So the giant crossbow is basically a bolt thrower with decent range, and it's the longest range actually of the Lizardmen army. They're not a long range army. And it's going to be poisonous, and the skinks on the back, like I was saying, are poisonous as well. So it's going to be one of the more... They described it in the live feed as the most autonomous artillery piece in the game. So it's going to be a really cool thing, because not only do you have the bolt thrower doing its action, you've got your skinks doing its action, but on top of it, it's all going to be on a Stegodon. So it's going to have a lot of, I guess you could say, value for its points, because you're going to have a ranged, a melee, and an artillery piece all in one unit. So it's going to be high cost, but hopefully it means that it'll also be high value. So then the other one, the Ancient Stegodon, has a giant blowpipe on top of it. It's got more armor, thicker skin, better leadership, but it's got two giant blowpipes, and these act like machine guns. So it's very anti-infantry centric, but it still's got its skinks on the back, and it still is a Stegodon. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Stegodon and the Bastiladon kind of change and play with the meta, because of the fact that they are such multi-purpose units. They've got so much to them as far as what they can bring to the table. But outside of them, you've got the Feral Carnosaur, and it's the most ferocious dinosaur in the lizard roster, more or less. It rampages real easily, but of course, unless it's mounted on kroq-gar and Old Blood. But a Scar veteran can't fully control them, so that's why they're not going to be on them as well. But these things, you're going to expect them to kind of rampage through armies, just kind of like almost like a feral manticore, but not flying, of course. In fact, I would say stronger than a manticore toe to toe. We're probably going to see something like an AP mechanic on it or something like that. That's all speculation. They didn't really go into any of the details of what the unit's stats are going to be like, but I would be not surprised if it was a pretty monstrous unit that, for the trade-off of it rampaging very easily, it does a crap ton of damage. So I'm really interested to see what kind of actual stat line this has. They did ask in the live stream, you know, hey, what kind of matchups, or what's the best that Lizardmen can do, or what's their weakest that they can do, or like their weakest matchup and their strongest matchup. And I was really hoping he'd go into that, the gentleman who was bringing us through the live stream, but they unfortunately didn't. He kind of gave us like a general breakdown of the armies themselves, of the army itself. He was saying that skinks can be used early as harassment units amongst some of the fastest units in general of skirmishers are the skinks. And the Saurus, they were saying, again, like just to reiterate, Saurus are quite slow and not as slow as Chaos Warriors. But all the dinosaurs are extremely fast, and you've got, again, that wild card in the rampage capabilities. So he was saying that you'd want to have the Skink Skirmish, the Saurus Warriors kind of come up as a strong central line, and you hold the dinosaurs back a bit, because that way you're not having them lose their life so they don't rampage through your front line. So I'm really interested to see that dynamic, because as a whole, the Lizardmen have the cold blood healing ability. And let me just read this here from my note. All units in the army have this. You can give them the order to fall back and heal, he was saying. And this will make them extremely vulnerable, but they will heal. So this way you can kind of cycle your feral creatures in and out of damage to heal them up so they don't rampage as easily. And coupled with the revivification crystal, it kind of allows you to teeter that balance between rampaging and not rampaging, and taking damage or absorbing damage and dishing it out. So they were saying that they're going to be doing a video on the magic lores that are coming out soon. My speculation 100% here is that all the lores will be included, because that's from the army book, that the Lizardmen have access to all the lores, including high magic. So it'll be interesting to see them showcase that, possibly through the Lizardmen before the high elves. But that's everything from the live stream today, guys. It was pretty damn exciting. I was sitting there at work, like bated breath, like, oh yes, kroq-gars, my nipples. So it was pretty damn cool. I'm really interested to see some more of the goodies that they show off of the Lizardmen, of the high elves, and of the dark elves. And there's not a fourth race. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But thanks for watching here, guys. Hopefully we'll have some more goodies planned for you with more of the reveals that come out. I'll be doing a Lizardman lore video that'll be coming either this weekend or early next week. So be on the lookout for that as well. Thanks for watching, and have a good one. Bye.